Ja hoor ik nu wel? Ja? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. Can everybody hear me? Welcome to Lutfia Rabbani Foundation public event, Entrepreneurship, a Euro-Arab Solution. Regrettably for you, my name is not Liz Doucet. I'm Salim Rabbani like last year. I'm Salim Rabbani, I'm chairman of the Lutfia Rabbani Foundation, and welcome here to all of you, excellencies, speakers, participants, and we're so happy that you're all here. The Lutfia Rabbani Foundation was established by my parents in the late 1970s with the objective of promoting Euro-Arab understanding. And initially, this was done through giving scholarships till the day of today, by giving scholarships to Dutch students to study in the Middle East and Arab students to study in the Netherlands. And this was followed the example of my father, who came to the Netherlands due to a scholarship. And the years thereafter, we felt that dialogue and bringing people together is a role that the foundation could also play. And therefore, for the past years, we've also been organizing the Euro-Arab dialogue, actually since the mid-90s. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the EU and the Arab world are tied at the hip, and we're tied through the geographical umbilical cord, and it's becoming clearer every day, not only how close we are to each other, but how dependent and interdependent we are on each other. Whether we talk about energy, whether we talk about trade, and yes, the last years and months, also when we talk about the exchange of, let's call it, human capital. And it's becoming day to day, it's becoming clearer how dependent we are on each other and how developments in one area directly impact developments in the other. Now, today my role is purely as a master of ceremonies. So let's get to the business at hand. This workshop was based on a recommendation from the conference that was held last year, which focused on a number of areas in the area of Euro-Arab cooperation. And one of the areas was, what role can entrepreneurship play in supporting developments between both regions and in creating a better work environment, in creating jobs, in creating closer relations between the EU and the Arab world. And the idea was to see, and as a Lutfia Rabbani Foundation, we felt that our role, the role that we could play, was to facilitate the process by bringing people together and by developing a framework, coming up with ideas and developing a framework which could later be presented to different stakeholders. And we felt the best way to develop this framework was to bring people that have a completely different perspective on the issues at hand. People from the education sector, from the innovation sector, from the private and the public sector, as well as from the financial sector, and both Arabs and Europeans. And the idea is that we develop this framework to encourage and support stakeholders, both Arabs and Europeans, to implement entrepreneurship as part of the solution, if indeed it turns out it is a solution, as part of a solution to reach out to these challenges and to resolve these challenges, and something which has a capacity to impact people directly and bring people closer together, which is the objective of our foundation. So we're not here to promote and discuss purely entrepreneurship. We're here to see how can we make entrepreneurship actionable in order to resolve issues at hand. Now, regarding today's program, there's been a change. The program book looks very nice, but we're not following the program, so that's what it comes down to. Initially, we thought that what we would organize is one panel describing what the issues are, and then one panel what we came up as part of the resolution. But we figured that you're going to start asking questions initially about what the resolutions are. We can't tell you, we're going to answer those later. So what we've done is we divided the groups, the speakers, into two panels. Initially, there will be two introductory statements by Rabia Ataya and by Ahmed Alfi. The first describing the situation as it is today, and the second describing the process of the past 2 days and what are potential action points that we'll be working upon during the coming period. Thereafter, we have two panels. The panels will work as follows. Initially, based on questions, the panelists will respond to one question each, and the rest of the panel will be dedicated to your questions and discussion with the audience. We'd like to end the day with your input, and that is the objective of today. So if I may, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Rabia Ataya. Rabia is the CEO of Bait.com, based in Dubai. Bait.com is the largest job site in the Arab world, and Rabia has been involved in a number of different activities, business activities, philanthropic activities, different activities in the Arab world, and we're very, very proud and thankful that he's here today. Please, Rabia.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Salim, thank you for organizing this, and thank you for bringing us all together. Salim was generous enough to invite me to participate last year in this event. And if I think back to my mindset last year, I would have thought that European-Arab cooperation was certainly something that was very important, but it wasn't clear to me how urgent it was. And when I think about where we are today, 12 months on, the world is such a different place. The Middle East is in a full-blown crisis, and that crisis is no longer contained within its borders, and that crisis has essentially become the world's crisis. And what was important, but not necessarily urgent, is now of the highest importance and urgency. And as we look at the problem, part of the question is, how do we best tackle it? Do we focus on the symptoms, as many of us have, and as we look at a lot of what's happening, whether it's in direct aid or the works of the various coalitions in the region, or do we try to tackle the root causes that are fundamentally driving the issues that have challenged the region and then the world? From my perspective, one of the root causes and one of the biggest challenges is the challenge of jobs in the Middle East region. To a lot of people in the region, to a lot of young people, getting a job is akin to winning the lottery. About 15 years ago, I thought part of the reason for that is because there were information barriers that didn't allow employers and job seekers to find out about each other. And I set out to create a marketplace which brought together opportunity and talent and let them meet and match. 15 years on, we currently have about 24 million people who built their profiles on our site and about 50,000 employers. And what we've realized is while we've helped hundreds of thousands of people get jobs, we realize that there's a fundamental other problem that we haven't been able to sort out. And that problem is there just aren't enough jobs to go around. And if I can characterize that from a very personal perspective, we compare ourselves always to our peers all over the world. And one of the examples I continually repeat is, if you were to advertise a job on the leading job site in Switzerland, you are likely to get 1 to 2 applicants. In most of mainland Europe, for a typical job on a leading job site, you will get up to 30 applicants. On Bait.com, if you were to advertise a job, you would get between 500 to 1,000 applicants to each job. So think about that. That's truly lottery type of odds. And so what's the answer to that? And if I may, that's the micro position. If you look at the macro position is the IMF and the World Bank claim we have the highest youth unemployment rates in the world at 25%. And there's also a figure that's continually cited that says to maintain current untenable unemployment, we need to generate over 100 million jobs in the next decade. So the question then becomes, if this is a fundamental problem that's causing young people to lose hope, how do we solve this problem of not enough jobs? And if we look all over the world, the lesson to job creation often lies with, or the solution to job creation often lies with SMEs. So all around the world, it is young businesses that are the drivers of growth in job counts. And in fact, there was a study done recently in the US which showed that the US employment, as an example, would have contracted every single year for the last 40 years had it not been for businesses that are younger than 5 years old. So entrepreneurship is a great way to help drive jobs, and by doing so, create employment, create hope, create stability in the region. Now, the next challenge we get to is if entrepreneurship is so important, why isn't it happening? And what can we do about that? And I think that's, to a large degree, what we've tried to tackle in the last 2 days. And there are many root causes to the challenges with entrepreneurship. And in many ways, if getting a job is like winning a lottery, succeeding in entrepreneurship in the Middle East is like winning the sweepstakes. It is such a challenging environment, from a cost to set up, to a time to set up, to getting the right human capital, to scaling, to dealing with the various governmental barriers that are out there. And what I've been very proud of in the last, 24 hours is working with a phenomenal group of people in trying to come up with some concrete answers to each of these challenges. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Rabia. And thank you to all the speakers, which we'll come to that in a minute, how in the way that you've worked together during the past, actually not even 48 hours, to come up. And if I may now, I'd like to give the floor to Ahmed Alfi. Ahmed is CEO and founder of Sawari Ventures, of Flat 6 Labs, and of Nafham Education. We've known each other since the time in California. He's not recently, 10 years ago, moved back to Egypt to bring his know-how, his expertise back home. And we're very proud, Ahmed, that you're here. If I give you the floor, please. Thank you.
So maybe just very quick comment. Our group of companies, we fund startups. We funded over 90 startups in Egypt, mostly Egypt, Saudi, and the UAE, and we'll be expanding around the Middle East. So have a lot of experience, but with the very top tier. To recap our discussions, I would say our discussion started in the framework on what's the motivation and why are we doing this? And it was the concepts of safety and security, stability, but as important, social justice. And there's a sense of offering opportunity and on all the participants that this isn't something we're doing out of selfish motivation, it's something we're doing out of a sense of overall responsibility as well as self-interest. So could I have the first slide? I'm going to give a recap. These are kind of the quick macro points that we, the group, agreed are the priorities. And the filters are the most important filter where are the things where we can make a difference. And the other thing is where are things we can make a difference with scale. And where can we make a difference with speed? So it's the important now that we can solve and on a big scale, not addressing 1 or 2 or 5 people at a time, smaller groups. So the first point was education. Rabia talked about entrepreneurs and people who need jobs, but there's a basic level of education. So we think that somewhere there's a mix of boot camps, scholarships, there are entrepreneur visas, scholarships, things that can be done. Online courses, that's something that I'm very involved in the Arab world with great results. Being able to give degree programs from European universities to people in the Middle East to help them with their job skills, offering internships, and at the same time, there's that broader group that needs the overall help in the basic education to not just the basic education of the base skills. One of the things that we talked about is we have to give this massive generation a lot of positive reinforcement and things to live for, because a lot of other people are selling them things to die for. The next slide, please. On the flip side, many of the sources of finance available in the Middle East, we have come to conclude are not really aware of many of the investment opportunities in startups and of the social impact. So to take it upon ourselves to educate and reach out to many of the financial institutions in the region, as well as linking European and Arab financial institutions so that the development agencies such as the EBRD or EIB or IFC as well as the banks, FMO, they don't feel that this is a one-sided financial equation. So presenting them with co-funding opportunities and basically accessing debt and equity markets that are available in the region as well as internationally. Next slide. And then the last thing where we unanimously agreed everybody can contribute is to participate in mentoring and technical support in helping entrepreneurs from the region be able to access talent, skills, and insights from people with experience, because one of the biggest missing components in the Middle East for the entrepreneurial community is the entrepreneurs that did not happen 20 years ago. There wasn't a generation of entrepreneurs that would be today's mentors and today's angel investors and today's board members for young startups. So that's one of the largest voids in our community, is bringing that talent in, and that's part of the area where we need help. And then the other thing was building a peer-to-peer network of entrepreneurs here throughout Europe and entrepreneurs throughout the Middle East, and putting them together, because there are a lot of business opportunities for entrepreneurs from Europe who want to enter the MENA region and vice versa. So that's it. That's kind of a summary of the highlights and the framework that we established over our discussions, with a lot of various opinions on each separate sub-subject, and I'm sure there'll be, after the panels, you'll be able to ask each of them about any of these specific issues, but that's kind of the overall framework, and we'll recap after the panel discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ahmed and Rabia. Thank you. So I think so far what's been said, 100 million new jobs need to be created in the coming 10 years, which is approximately the size of the total job market in the region. Getting a job is like winning a sweepstake. That the initiatives that we're trying to develop have to be scalable, so we can reach enough people, that they have to affect people directly, and they have to be implementable. Those were the thoughts that we were working with. I'm very happy and proud that we have a great group of people on the panel. First of all, Amin, President and CEO of Ask for Human Development. Amin has a strong link also to the Netherlands, having studied in Delft. Josette Duikhuizen, an entrepreneurship professor, mentor, scientist, and author, and someone who's very, very involved in women entrepreneurship and in entrepreneurship with different groups of people. Yannick Dupont, director of Spark, advocacy group for youth entrepreneurship. Bas Pullis, the director international at NL Enterprise Agency, RVO. Dr. Fawaz Zabi, previous minister of ICT of Jordan, and currently the founder and CEO of Accelerator Technologies in Jordan, between Jordan and the EU. And Yasmin Smaldi, who's a founder of two startup companies and has come to the Netherlands in order to do her MBA at Nijrode University, which she just completed. So, Yasmin, maybe I can start with you to bring things practical. So if you look at the Middle East and if you look at the companies that you've started up, what challenges did you face? And maybe before that, why did you decide to start a company?
Well, the reason why I started the companies was mainly because I've always had a dream to have something, my own thing, and to contribute to the society in a way or another. So it also gives me a sense of accomplishment to see something that I thought about turning from an idea into reality. So that was the main reason why I started the two ventures. And the second question was regarding the challenges?
Yeah, what were the challenges in starting the...
For me, the challenges were mainly after starting up the ventures, because starting up the ventures was not a difficult thing. It just took some time. But what I needed after starting up the ventures was mainly mentorship, which is kind of available, let's say, in Jordan and the Middle East, but I didn't have the access probably to the right people and the right mentors in the region. So mainly mentorship was a challenge. Also financing in terms of funding and finding maybe the right way to approach the investors, or knowing which is the best way to do it. So it's lack of maybe knowledge from my side also about how to finance startups. And also, yeah, mainly these are the two challenges: mentorship and financing for the startups. So I think the challenges are more in how to run the business, grow it, and make it sustainable, and not in the starting of the ventures.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I mean, this is your third startup since you've gone back to the Middle East after studying here at TU Delft. In your experience, what is missing in the education system or in other some of the people that you're dealing with when it comes to entrepreneurship? What is missing? What are you missing in your startup activities and your development activities in Jordan? Excuse me.
Good afternoon.
Yeah.
First of all, I would like to say I'm extremely happy to be here, and a lot of gratitude to Lutfia Rabbani Foundation, because I was one of the lucky ones who enjoyed the scholarship to do my study at TU Delft successfully 15 years ago. So to start with that. Now going back to the education sector and the relation to entrepreneurs in the Arab world, I think we are being faced with an extreme challenge in the kind of education we are providing in our basic education. Yani if we all agree about the importance of entrepreneurs in creating these jobs for the future, we need really to think of the pipeline for entrepreneurs and the percentage of potential entrepreneurs we have in the region. It's sad that until today, our basic education is not providing what I would call fundamental competencies that are supposed to be delivered by the education system in terms of, kids being stimulated to be creative, to be critical, to have enough self-confidence, to be able to take initiatives, to plan and think in project way. Our education system is still, especially the public education system, and I would dare to make the statement across the whole region. We have been working the last 15 years with more than 30,000 teachers in more than 2,000 schools across the region. It's still what we call the spoon-feeding system. It's memorizing system. Kids are coming in, they're supposed to memorize certain things, go and do the exams. The exams are very traditional. And this means when they finish their school and when they join the universities, which are not much better, they stay in the same direction. And if we look at that and see to which extent that fit with creating new entrepreneurs or creating new business, or to which extent there are available resources that are qualified to come and take the different positions and opportunities in new ventures, we have a big challenge. So part of the things that I was trying to push to as much as possible, we must think of the pipeline. It's not only stimulating and enhancing and providing all kinds of support for existing entrepreneurs or for startups, but also focusing on the basic education system in the sense of thinking how we can broaden the pipeline, how we can ensure that kids who are finishing their schools are more qualified. We thought of short courses that can be added to the existing curricula, focusing on the kind of competencies I just mentioned, creativity, project work, etc., as well as maybe boot camps in the summer, which also come into focus on developing and enhancing these competencies.
And the idea would be that boot camps could be an exchange between Europe and the Arab world.
Absolutely.
That they could be held here as well as there, as possibly online.
Absolutely, and I would even add to it, any part of our relation back with the Netherlands, the Dutch education system, as an example, and I'm sure across Europe there are more of successful models which we can benefit from in developing such an extracurricular for basic education. whether it will be done here or be done there. And the same kind of boot camps, even it can be used with refugee camps in the Netherlands or in Europe in order to provide, and I will go back to what Rabia and Ahmed just said, it's about giving the hope. I mean, if youth coming out of the schools or universities realize that their education did not provide them with the minimum package that qualify them to get a job, to start their future, by default they will get frustrated and disappointed. And this is why whatever we can provide to boost their capabilities and competencies, this will give them the hope. This will make them realize there are opportunities out there for us that we can get, and we need to invest our best in order to get it and to achieve it.
Thank you. Josette, you've been very active in with refugees and migrants, both here in the Netherlands as well as in different parts of the world, including the Arab world. And you've worked to establish entrepreneurship boot camps and other forms of boot camps in the refugee centers. What impact does it have, and what is the role also of women in these camps?
What Amin just said is really, in addition to the basic education, that you need special programs like the boosting programs we already have in this country at the starter boot camps. But if you combine that with a real exchange of people from the Arabic world to Europe, and not only for a day, but you really do that in summertime, you do it 4 to 6 weeks, people really get to know the Dutch industry or the European industry. It's not about lecturing, it's more about getting experience, talking to people, really walking, with entrepreneurs about how they do things, why they do things, building up the confidence, all kinds of capabilities. And that's not only in lecturing, but really sorting out and exchanging these programs. And what I think about the boot camps, it's quite easy to organize as well. It's not something why we need, a long term to do that. If you look at the immediate impact, you would have immediate impacts, and it's fairly easy to organize. I'm part of a university, so you can have that exchange been done also by trainers of universities. And for me, with a special focus on women entrepreneurs, as you said, Salim, women have a very large potential. We still have a lot of women entrepreneurs, and the potential is not fully covered. And that's economically, but mainly for me, it's a social impact that they can create. If you look at Europe, most of the social entrepreneurs are women. So I think if we can develop also gender-sensitive programs, we would attract more women, and that would radiate towards other women. Just what Yasmin also said about the mentoring, but also seeing role models, making them more visible, that people see, okay, but if the entrepreneur can do and take these kind of steps, I might be able to do it. So it's a big radiation of these type of programs. And if we would have a few places in these programs, especially dedicated for refugees, I think that would really be of relevance for the Arabic world, but also for this country. I'm in the process of starting up an entrepreneurship program for refugees in the south of Holland. I think it's important, not only for these people and for their future here in this country, but also for making it visible, showing these people and everyone that there's a big potential of entrepreneurs and creating jobs, but also doing something really good for this world. So it's a whole package of boot camps and mentoring and making the entrepreneurs visible.
Thank you. Maybe in order to make it a little more specific for the audience, when we speak of boot camp, content-wise, what does that mean?
What I heard in many countries that, for example, marketing is one of these topics that is extremely important. So to learn people coming from the Palestinian territories or from Jordan, how we put things on the market, how we collaborate. We have a country where there's a lot to do with multiple helix, with collaboration with different parties. I think these are the things that you can do in field visits, in really walking along with entrepreneurs in the fields. And also the other way around, because if I go to the Arabic world, I'm very, very excited coming back and seeing how resilience has been explained and how people cope with that. So it's really, lecturing, but visiting other companies, really walking alongside other entrepreneurs and learn, exchange, and build up innovation, because that's one of the things you can do together with other people from other continents.
Thank you. Yannick, Spark has been active in numerous countries. Can you explain a little more about the background of Spark and how you're dealing with the current crisis and how it relates to the exchange aspect between both areas in the world?
Yeah, sure. We traditionally don't work. Spark is a Dutch nonprofit, and we traditionally worked in the Balkans and Africa on youth entrepreneurship, so training, coaching, access to finance for entrepreneurs. But I think it's a sign of the times. If I look today, we're from the 17 countries we are present in. 11 are actually Arab states, and that's North Africa and around Syria. So, I mean, on a bigger scale, I think first of all our work is completely getting sucked into that region, actually, and I see this with many other organizations like our own. And the second thing that really strikes me is that whereas before you had already large challenges in access to finance, quality to education in the Arab region, the scale of the challenge right now is just enormous. So yeah, we'll be looking and actually we'll be adjusting some of our approaches. I think after these days, also getting some great input from the others, and working with some of the others here. And that we have to think about very large, scalable solutions. I think this is something really that I picked up in recent times, and again was reconfirmed in these meetings that, you know, the kind of challenges we are now meeting is not anymore going to be solved by just helping a couple. I think we need to help many. But maybe to make it a little bit more concrete, we'll give 2 examples and also how that can link into European expertise. On behalf of the Dutch government, actually 2 years ago, we brought the 13 Syrian students to the Netherlands. It was supposed to be 30, so 17 more. We had 900 applications, but only 13 made it to the GMAT and the TOEFL test. And then already we had a big discussion about the cost effectiveness of this. But secondly, you know, of the problem that only 13 were actually able to meet these entry requirements, which was actually quite shocking for us. So then now, we have fast forward now 3 years, we'll be launching, or we have launched, we're now placing until December, thousands of Syrian refugees in the region in higher vocational education and universities, which I think it's about factor 20 more cost efficient. However, the quality, of course, is an issue because the quality of these institutions that we've heard, rightly so, is really problematic. So I think there we need to really add components on how to strengthen the quality of the curriculum of the partners we work with in the region, so university providers in the region. And to get to scale, and I think if you think about the Syrian crisis, we calculated around 400,000 Syrian youth at the moment should be in higher education, and they're not. Some of them have been in camps for 4 years, so they have not gotten further education for 4 years. So if we assume that this crisis will last another, well, X number of years, you're going to lose an entire generation. So from Syria, from being actually a leading country in education in the region, it will fall back to the lowest levels. And you will not have also people to build up that country. So I think there really we need to think about scalable solutions. Ahmed had a wonderful platform on online education that I think really we should be looking at how can we also help these countries to start recognizing blended learning, change the system to allow for accredited blended learning, so you can reach scale. So you can, with the same amount of money, through blended learning, reach maybe 10 times more, again, youth. And link it into European accreditation systems, perhaps, or European institutions who have experience with entrepreneurship education. And I think a second thing is really that even how tough it is, and we were discussing this a lot, is that, you know, and this was, I think, one for me, it's still a dilemma. Do you design good programs and you stay away from these governments? Because, you know, governments change very slowly, so maybe you want to get success, so maybe you want to, you know, just quickly get success and work around issues. I strongly still believe in that we have to find those change leaders in these countries, in governments, to work with them to try to make structural changes. So one great example that I really hope also after these days to pick up with the group is a request we got from the Libyan Minister of Education from Benghazi. We worked with him already for years when he was a vice or a director there. He's now Minister of Education, and he asked us, can you please find us partners and help us to start introducing entrepreneurship education and life skills starting from the secondary school all the way to university. And I'm now a minister, so I can endorse this curriculum for at least the part where I have control. And so I think these kind of initiatives will definitely also pick up. And I think we have to leverage also the action-packed energy of the private sector and of these amazing initiatives that are out there in the Arab world to help these change makers in government to try to get real results that will last beyond the action intervention that will do. One last thing that really also a point I wanted to make is that I see a lot of funding now going into that region. I see a lot of planning happening. As NGO, we get happily invited by UN, by EU, by governments to come to all kinds of planning sessions these days. And I've had now in the last month maybe 5 of those sessions in London, in Geneva, in Amman, and like up to 300 people, sometimes only 2-3 representatives from the Arab business sector. And I'm really thinking, wow, I mean, everybody here, all these policymakers are discussing about job creation, livelihood, etc. So I think it's very important also to get these business leaders that are here plugged into these processes and let them really be thinking how all these interventions can be designed from the outset.
So let's get invited to the next one. And thank you very much, Yannick. Bas, how do you see the role of government when it comes to the current developments, and what tools can the Dutch government offer in terms of entrepreneurship exchange, in terms of entrepreneurship developments in the Arab world? And maybe also from another aspect, part of the discussion that we had was it's not a one-way relationship; it's a mutual relationship. So the discussion, much of it, of course, has been going in terms of how does the Arab world, what can go that, but also in terms of what are the Dutch interests in being involved in this.
Salim, we are these policymakers who talk about job creation, and I think that we have learned quite well already from Rabea in the introduction, but also in the discussions, that jobs are made by companies and by private sector and not by governments. In that sense, I think responsibility to create jobs is within the private sector. And then the question, of course, comes up, what can governments do? What can the Dutch government do? And being from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, and bear with me, then I also try to combine job creation in the MENA region, also with market opportunities for Dutch industry or research institutes or other Dutch players. I think 2 ways we have been discussing over the last 1.5 days on involvement of public sector in this issue of job creation. First and foremost, I think, but also the most difficult, is creating an enabling environment where entrepreneurship can grow, can flourish. And we took a short look at the ease of doing business ranking, one of the rankings where you have 189 countries ranked on how easy is it to set up a company and run a company. Now you see quite high in the rankings is, for instance, like Dubai or the United Arab Emirates. In that region, the Gulf region still, but then it goes down quite quickly, and quite some countries in the MENA region are low in the ranking, which means that you have a difficult, in some cases even a very, very difficult business climate to do business. Can government do something? Yes, local governments can do something, the governments of the countries involved. We did learn that it's difficult. There is a big gap between contact between the private sector and the governments to push improvements, something we are used to here in the Netherlands. Yesterday we had Mr. Bernard Wientjes, former head of the Dutch Employers Organization, and he tried to push collective action of businesses to improve your own business climate. We're doing that in the Netherlands, but it's not common in the countries where we are looking up in the MENA region. Can Dutch government or European government do something? Yes, we are doing some things. One of the speakers in the next panel will probably go a little bit more into depth in that, but we do have technical assistance training and this type of stuff to at least try to be involved in the improvement of some of the institutional framework in the countries we are looking upon. And again, from my point of view, I would stress, look at those type of institutional changes which do have an effect on future Dutch business opportunities. So look at food safety if you want to export or invest in the agricultural sector. Look at customs if you do logistics and distribution. Then the second part next to the environment is direct assistance to private sector development, to business developments in the MENA region. From my organization, we implement a number of programs, varying from grants to push joint ventures of Dutch companies with local companies, create direct jobs, up to funding schemes in the sense of a revolving fund, the Dutch Good Growth Fund. We are running for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where you have direct lending, credit lines and guarantee lines to individual Dutch investors in the region, as well as money going to local funds, so that local funds can invest in small and medium-sized enterprises in the country. Again here, we have quite some experience with the grant part, not so much experience with the credit part. It's a 1 year running for now. But in the grant part, you do see the strength of the Dutch in the region, especially in agri-food, in horticulture, in logistics, in water management, coming in, grabbing opportunities with local partners and creating, in that sense, thousands of jobs in companies which have an export potential, so also sustainability. Now, the last part of my introduction would be governments also have a role in matchmaking, bridging, and networking. Traditionally, by being present at fairs or taking action in trade missions. Trade missions can be both ways, of course, ingoing and outgoing. Matchmaking, which is much more on a business-to-business level. You can do that virtually, but you can certainly also do that in a physical sense alongside these bigger events. And maybe later, and in the next panel, we will see also some examples of connecting ecosystems for instance, startup activities. We did a few also in this government-to-government programs, but I think there is much room for improvement also between both blocks in the future.
Thank you, Bas. Fawaz, you're the only person, speaker between the group from the Arab side who has experience in both the public and the private sector, first as a minister of ICT and later in the private sector. How do you view the role that the Arab public sector can play first, okay, in terms of supporting entrepreneurship? And then thereafter, maybe you could give me a little idea, you know, in your migration from the public to the private sector, where do you see the bridge today?
Interesting, thank you. It's nice to be here with everyone. Maybe first I'll tell you that I started my life as an entrepreneur, then became a minister in government, and then went back to the private sector to invest in entrepreneurs. And therefore, I've seen all three, and to this day, I can't tell which one is more difficult, which one is easier, to tell you the truth, but neither of them are easy. Governments, we need to understand, I think, most and foremost, because I consider myself to have been slightly more privileged in having the support of a leader in our country, in Jordan, which has given me really a platform which very few ministers actually could have a privilege like it, where because I was involved as minister in the ICT sector a decade ago, a time when technology was really transforming the world and there was change that was literally overcoming the whole Arab world. I think we were very lucky in the way that I was able to actually have what I call an entrepreneurial ministry. So I treated the ministry as a business. Initially, I would go into the system and had a strategy of actually changing the culture within the government, within my own ministry initially, to see how I can actually make people understand that it is our role as government to promote entrepreneurship in its real sense. 80% of our entrepreneurs actually are people that today the enterprise value of their business does not exceed $15,000. These people today are not accounted for in policy, and I think if you go back in the short history to the day it happened in Tunisia, where the transformation in the Arab Spring started, it was really a very, very clear reflection of the low glass ceiling that is placed on entrepreneurs through the failings of the system in terms of its policy, in terms of the judiciary or the judicial system, and entitlement, corruption, and what have you, that is associated with a lot of governments. And I think that what's really happened now, unfortunately, in the very recent period, is that governments are in a fighting mode because of the transformations that their countries are witnessing. And I don't mean to be in any way portraying a negative view of government, because really at the heart of it, my belief is that every government has the best of intention of dealing with the problems they face. The only problem where it comes to entrepreneurship in particular is that the DNA within government actually does not understand how entrepreneurship can actually contribute to economic growth. And I think this is really one of the biggest problems we have. And therefore, when we set policies, we set laws, we set regulations, we don't do enough to address this type of transformation that each of our countries needs very badly. And it has put a lot of pressure today on many of the governments to see what role they can actually play to help propagate entrepreneurship in a way that will allow these young people create the jobs that we heard are needed, and how to deal with that. Now, when you look at many of the countries, whether Morocco, for instance, which is now seeing a transformation, and its government is trying now to start developing ways of how they can actually help them. You have Tunisia as well. I think the most important there for us all to learn is the role of women, which has advanced quite significantly compared to the rest of our world. You have Dubai, which is a country that is addressing very clearly the needs in terms of the legal and proper infrastructure for entrepreneurship. And there is obviously a long way to go, but they are doing the right thing in terms of their thought process and strategy. You have Jordan, who has started a decade ago, but still needs a long way to be able to really create the pipeline that is significant to create, to really make this movement worth it. And Lebanon. But in the end, it's all I found to be about leadership. And literally a single leader in a single organization can make a huge difference to how much those small steps can go a long way towards very big impact within the countries and the societies. And I think, each one of our countries can talk about a one or more leader that has been able to create a transformational story regarding this. So just 1 minute on my later life, okay? It has been a fantastic ride investing in entrepreneurs in our region. I find that the quality of entrepreneurs we have is nothing less than anything I've seen anywhere in the world, even the most advanced in the United States. I think one thing that we have done successfully as a company, as a venture capitalist, is that we have extended our reach to the United States so that we would give our entrepreneurs a platform to be able to connect between the Arab world and Silicon Valley and New York. So we invested in 30 startups in the region, and we invested in 30 in the United States. And today, all 60 of them know each other on a personal basis. They know what the others do. We have events over there where we actually place our entrepreneurs through 2 days of very intense workshops, and then each one of them spends 1 week with a counterpart in the same industry. This has brought tremendous exposure to our entrepreneurs. And I think that we need to replicate this, and this would be one of my goals, actually, is to be able to see how I can get the help to replicate this exact story in several of the European countries and several of the European cities. And I really do look forward to some success there if God's on my side.
Oh, thank you very much, Fawaz. And actually, what we should say is Fawaz actually is Euro-Arab exchange himself. His mother's Dutch.
Mm-hmm.
So,
the better half of me.
Yeah. If I may, we have half an hour for questions and discussion. If I may ask that if you have a question, to please state your name, state if you're with an organization, which organization, and who the question is addressed to. So please. Sorry, the microphones will be coming to you. Yeah.
Hi, Pim de Box. I'm a serial entrepreneur and also chairman of the Dutch Incubators and Accelerators. And I have just to continue on your story, what I was missing in the beginning, the ideas to develop our entrepreneurship programs and so on, is there regulatory framework in a country that 2 years ago I did a fact-finding trip in Morocco and Tunisia for the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs and talked to many incubators and startups and so on. And as well, some incubators I remember in Morocco, an incubator that has a very simple service to help people with registering their company. Out for a Dutch businessman, that's a strange thing to offer, because that's already very simple to get done in the Netherlands. But many countries, that's very difficult things to do. To get could last for 9 months, or it's so difficult that people don't do it. And I remember from Tunisia, it's very difficult or uninteresting for investors because there is no bankruptcy law. I didn't try it out myself, although I'm an investor, but so I'm missing a bit of that element in our ideas now going around how can we influence, let's say, governments to change these regulations. Also, and I don't mean government to government, because we are not the government here. But and then this morning we had we were on other conference, the two of us, also here in The Hague, and we had zware. We had 6 pitches of law innovations from all over the world, 3 from Africa and 2 from the US and 1 from Nepal. And 3 of them were really focused at how can we generate enough people, basically public pressure, to get regulation changed or moderated in a way that people can normally live or do business. So that could be a sort of hook, an idea that we can also talk about how you can change or improve, so to say, regulation in Morocco, Tunisia, when we are, or somewhere else in the Middle East, to improve the possibilities for pioneers to start up companies or to scale up companies, if that's an issue.
Thank you.
That was an idea.
Thank you very much. Who would like to please, Dr. Foss?
Just one quick word to address the issue of, in particular, let me talk about Jordan very quickly. When I was in office, we had actually a very, very strong public-private partnership, which together proposed the strategy, and that strategy was adopted by the ministry to be the strategy that we would go forward with, and that included a lot of changes in the regulations and in the laws. And actually, all of those changes were proposed by the private sector, and they happened. So now, the king had realized in the last couple of years that there has been very little attention paid to this exact point on the policy issue. And they have just started about 4 months ago the second round of this, what we call the REACH initiative, in which it will propose also exactly what you're talking about on the regulatory framework side, because that literally is the toughest among all of the listed components to be tackled. And until this is again a role for government, the partnership with the private sector is a must. It's not something that we just can ignore.
Please, boss.
Just on one aspect we discussed, Salim, even in the Netherlands we can do things better for startup companies. We have a special envoy by the former commissioner from the European Union leading the Startup Delta initiative in the Netherlands, and also trying to rephrase the voice of startup companies also on the climate, the business climate in the Netherlands. And one of the issues that came out of that initiative was also a startup visa, to get people with startups in even quicker than we now have on knowledge migration or any other of the visa issues. And I think that in the group today and yesterday also, we did point out how to improve the visa issue for students, but certainly also for startups, not only in the Netherlands in this initiative, but also mutually back home to the countries in Jordan or anything else. So it might also be a suggestion to take with us and with the companies back home. And if we could share the ideas happening in the Netherlands, but also in other hubs like in Silicon Valley where you've been, you could really make some matches on best practices, which we are all developing in most of our countries.
Thank you. Next question. Please.
Salim, thank you. My name is Mauritius Wijfels. I'm a Dutch lawyer with a Middle Eastern practice. Salim, thank you to you and your team for another wonderful event, and thank you to the panel for sharing your thoughts. I understand you've been working and thinking through for 2 days, and I'm actually looking for a particular conclusion. Perhaps it's too early in the day to get that conclusion. You touched on all the relevant topics, and not just on the need of exchange of knowledge and know-how, but also on funding and on the role of the state. The way I've experienced the Arab region over the decades is that it's the mirror image of the West, whereas here in countries in the West you have SMEs that represent in between 80 and 95% of the economy, and without them there wouldn't be a country, there wouldn't be an economy to speak of. In the Arab region, in a varying degree, the state has the monopoly of the mineral wealth, or other states have derivative income from those states. But in both cases, you'll find that the state has an inordinate amount of influence on how the middle class is created, and if and to what extent SMEs can actually develop. Have you come to any conclusions as to whether there could be a three-party solution that would include working both with the exchange, which is of course one of the pillars of the foundation, but at the same time involving governments in that same approach, so that it can also be achieved that governments become, in the Arab region, a little more relaxed about the fact that people want to run their own show and make it easier for them. Is it, or is the suggestion, let's work on the exchange first and deal with the government later, because it gets too complicated? Thank you.
Who can I give the word? Nick?
Yeah, we did discuss at length, and I think I touched on it very briefly. Like, do you implement initiatives and then you avoid the issue so you can get quick results, but they're a bit limited, or do you really try to get systematic change for which you need multiple actors? And I think one of the best answers I heard coming from from one of the Arab business representatives was, you have to look at change leaders. So if you look at the United Emirates, for example, who have a clear top leadership backing of some really important reforms, it does make sense. Or if you have a minister like Fawaz was, with backing from the king, then it really makes a lot of sense. So I think we have to break it down and see per country. I think that's what we had agreed, and looking at where actually you have the change leaders. So if you have a Libyan minister saying, I want this, please design it and get the business sector involved in doing it, and I will approve it, then I think you have a go. If you have a situation where you have a very regressive or very difficult situation government-wise, or maybe half a government because of all the conflicts happening, you might not have so much success, or you might want to postpone that a bit.
Please.
In addition to what was just mentioned, I would say the reality that we're facing today in the Arab world, private sector is not as strong as it's in Europe. That's a fact. That's the way it is. And the question is, to which extent the private sector is capable of influencing governments and pushing for reform in the regulatory framework in the whole ecosystem. I would say, as sad as it sounds, the private sector is not that strong. And in many cases, from own experience, the position will be, let's try to avoid the heat of the interference of the government. And instead, you don't want to pressure, you don't want to exercise any kind of pressure. Rather, you are trying just to get the space to develop and enhance and excel your business. In that sense, I would say today, the private sector in most of the Arab countries are not able to exercise such change or pressure for change. But the stronger the private sector will get in these economies, the more resources, the more leverage will be possible to instill and to push for the reform that is needed. And it has to do with income generation for, and as you mentioned, your statement is exactly in the right place. You know, the total value of the private sector in the whole economic chain of each country is also one of the reasons why the influence is not that big and the leverage is not that big today.
And I think what you are seeing is that, you know, certain countries who are opening up their markets are taking a huge lead. Like, for example, if you look at in terms of bringing in companies. And I think that puts pressure also on other countries. And so what you're seeing, eventually you will see also competition between countries in terms of, just like we have here in Europe. At the end of the day, you know, this whole discussion now about, you know, which country has, let's say, the best tax situation or the worst regulatory situation, or in the Middle East, that will develop also. But the private sector, for various reasons, which we also discussed today, doesn't have the overwhelming strength in order to develop that change. Also because many of the governments are very strong in the private sector in a number of the countries. Because, like you said, the resources are owned. Yeah. Who can ask the next question? Still have 10 minutes. By one, please.
I'm Nando van Ketwig, now social entrepreneur. I lived in Asia a long time. I wanted to ask, because Amin was saying, yes, indeed, the governments are not so much involved with private enterprises. I worked in China, Korea, Vietnam a lot, and there the situation is different, and I think we could learn from that. Even we could think about working in a tripartite form, but because these countries are investing also a lot in Middle East, so we can use our relations there to work together. I think we look at both sides, not only bilateral. So in this case, government can learn maybe also from governments there, because many rules and regulations in these countries have been adapted to more international traffic and business. Thank you.
Thank you. And I think Mr. Ketwin, points out a very good point, which is the Netherlands, particularly the Netherlands, I think can be used by a lot of Arab companies to set the link also with different parts of the world. And that is really the strength also of the Netherlands, in terms of linking different parties together, not only within Europe, but outside Europe. But who could I ask to comment on that? Please, Bas.
Very briefly, because I think Mr. Van Ketwig has a very good suggestion. More and more we try to hook up with other countries, for instance, also in the development cooperation, to jointly go into a third country. Yesterday we had a nice suggestion of a colleague who's not here today, who said, well, also look at the East-West within the MENA region. So this trilateral part could also be from the Gulf region into North Africa with Dutch involved. So I think that part of the new approach might be to make bigger linkages and consortia, because then also the one-on-one, win-on-win is a bit more broadly dispersed, and it's maybe less dangerous or less in the sense from principal messages of one country to another, and making it in 3 countries or 3 players might be part of the solution.
Please. Oh.
Hello, my name is Paul Aerts, University of Amsterdam, and dealing with the Middle East since 4 decades. There's one word, or actually 2 words, I missed so far. Labor union. No one talked on the role of labor unions, and we know that in some countries they do not exist because they are forbidden, but in some countries they are legal. Wouldn't that be a partner, at least to talk about now a little bit? Thank you.
Who may I give?
Yeah. I'll say a word, but I'm not sure really I'm the right person to discuss on this particular thing because I have not come across unions per se. And I mean, okay, we have the engineers unions, we have unions for lawyers and what have you, but we don't have so much the labor union in a country like Jordan. They do have them in some of the other countries, but I cannot personally, I mean, having been in the entrepreneurial sphere over the past decade or so, I have not come across this concept, to tell you the truth, in any way that would, you know, trigger anything in my mind to have a role for a union as such. Sorry, I mean, maybe that's not what you wanted to hear, but it's just, when the light goes on, you have to say something, but there is no light.
Please, may I give the word to Ahmed Alfi on...
The only real activity by labor unions in the Middle East is in Egypt, and it's mostly government employees. Those are the ones that are unionized. The GCC countries don't have labor unions, imported labor. And Jordan and the other countries don't really. Tunisia is unique, but again, a very small market when we're addressing the whole region as a global solution.
No role for them.
Not in the context of the issues we discussed over the last 2 days.
Please. Oh, sorry, Eric, please go ahead.
I think I always feel obliged to still respond to my former professor of political science at the university. No, but I think it is a good point that you do see, of course, and we haven't discussed that, but you do see, for example, also with the migration waves now, massive labor issues, both for host communities that are absorbing a lot of migrants that are then being employed to replace domestic workers, again, sometimes only 30% of the salary levels, which are already very low, with no labor protection. But I think, yeah, so I think it is very important to look at it. On the other hand, the discussion that we always have very much is that we see other like the Dutch FNV, I think they have a program, FNV International, I think, has a program, building up these unions. But when you talk about entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship development discussion that we've been often having is, you know, is then the labor union at this stage important for growth SMEs or creating jobs rapidly with startups? Or, I mean, is this something that's more, when you come to, is this something that you can mainstream in your program already? Say, look, if you support certain firms, and I think the EBRD, for example, the EBRD I know is doing it, that when you do a due diligence on where you invest, that you put certain criteria, that it has to be compliant to decent work background. So basically then the investors or the donors are basically replacing, to some extent, you cannot replace it, but maybe keeping an eye on that business is being done properly and labor rights are being respected. I guess it's also very sensitive at the moment. Anything that has to do at the moment, we were talking about student union build-up around the MENA region now with Syrian refugee students, and we've been told really to do it very carefully, very low level, because, you know, after all the revolutions, social movement building is not something that makes governments extremely happy at this moment. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Salim. My name is Ehsan Tourabas. I work for a small company called IKEA. We are very much involved in the Middle East, so we're expanding a lot there. My question is how we can involve much more multinationals to do more in these great talks which you have had on the unemployment problem. The role of multinationals in the Middle East. Thank you.
Who can I give?
I will go back to the mass programs that we need badly in basic education or for youth. And that would be an excellent opportunity for the multinationals, if they are genuinely and sincerely interested to create value in these countries, is by stimulating programs for youth, building their entrepreneurial capabilities, building and again, when I talk about programs for youth focusing on entrepreneurship, I don't see that only it will produce entrepreneurs running business. It can produce all kind of Social entrepreneurs can produce proactive citizens who are more committed and interested to fulfill their role and responsibility in their community in a positive way, adding value in all terms to their community. So it's not only encouraging business entrepreneur, that's one product or one result that we will get, but we can see it in a much wider context in the sense of encouraging and giving hope for the youth today, where recent studies by the UN is talking about 25% unemployed university graduates in the Arab world as an average, which you can imagine what kind of frustration and what kind of losing perspective, how the future will be. And then we can surely understand some of the roots behind the current political situation and why things are going the way they are.
Maybe you want to add something?
Perhaps I can answer the question in two different ways. And one is, today we had a wonderful intervention from Anne Habibi, who's part of our working group. And she had mentioned, and I apologize, Anne, I'm going to paraphrase, but feel free to correct me if I get anything wrong. Anne had studied the DNA of successful entrepreneurs in the Middle East. What's common about them? And she found that the most common themes that underlie or that bring together all of these successful entrepreneurs tends to be two primary things. One is they've gotten a great foreign education for the most part from a foreign university. And two, upon finishing that university experience, they went and worked with some of the largest companies in the world and picked up experiences there. And so the role of multinationals, to a large degree, are educational institutions. They can really help young people in the region learn what it is like to work in an institutionalized organization, and it helps them set a vision for themselves as well as a way of working. And so the big ask that I would personally have for the multinationals is beyond what you're already doing, which is employing a lot of people in these regions. It's to give a lot of also internships and other opportunities for young people to actually start getting a taste and a flavor for the workplace. And the earlier that people can do that, the more likely they are to be set on the correct path and come back and add value.
Thank you. One question here, lady.
I will keep it short. Yes, my name is Saskia Harkema. I'm an academic, and I'm chairman of an NGO, Face of Change, which works with refugees. I will try to phrase my question. It's a question which is basically quite fundamental, which addresses the functioning of our economic system as such, and the role of entrepreneurship in our economic system. And if you look back in history, you see that the thoughts of people that are already long dead have determined how this economic system works. We speak about Adam Smith, 1774, Joseph Schumpeter, 1934, and Keynes somewhere around 1850. Basically, these are the founders of our economic system. And to what extent, I'm wondering, when we are thinking about the possibilities of entrepreneurship in the Middle East, and we are not narrowing down ourselves or restraining ourselves by thinking within that existing paradigm. Well, the existing paradigm has proved, sorry to say so, that it doesn't really function perfectly. I was recently watching with my students a documentary, I can recommend it to you, Meltdown, made by Al Jazeera, which explains very clearly the financial breakdown of 2008. And what is happening is that regions are starting to copy what we have done here in Europe and in the United States. And the question is whether that should be the way forward, because now the prediction is that China is making a giant leap, and the prediction is actually that China is going to cause the next meltdown.
Thank you.
So to what extent is it not interesting to think of a totally different approach or insights to tap into the enormous potential of the Middle East, because there's an enormous potential there.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Who can I give? Did you say you wanted to answer? Sorry, Fawaz, please.
Yeah, I don't mind.
And after that, there's one last question before the break over there after. Please, Fawaz.
Thank you. It's funny you mentioned Jean-Peter, because just only recently I've been reading about what he's been doing and what he had done. And literally, much of the early thought that came through him actually today is extremely relevant, right? Maybe the only difference is the speed of how things are going and the disruption that is taking place and the extent of it. Much more, I think the thoughts then were also focused more on the enterprise level, where the innovation was happening within these large companies, which to a large extent don't exist in our part of the world, right? So much of the innovation that does come within our society comes actually more on the individual level as opposed to within the enterprise system. And that obviously does lend itself to exactly what you're saying, is that we should have our own criteria for developing the entrepreneurship along our own rules. One of the issues that we do face is an issue of capability, right? We need exposure. Our entrepreneurs literally today do not, and this is what Rabia was talking about when he talked about these large companies, the global companies who can have a role. The role really is only building capacity, giving exposure, helping us really develop the capability to build the businesses and take them to as high a level as we are able to do that. Today, we have a major gap in that area, and we do need that exposure from economies that have already been through much of this change. And this is why actually the link with those economies is a must for us at this point in time, if we're going to be able to really accelerate the build-up of the capability. And so indigenous, I agree with you, 100%, and it cannot be a replica. But there has to be, with the indigenous plan, a capacity building plan, which we cannot do without the links outside.
Thank you. Last question, and then we go to the break.
Thank you. My name is Robin Vanderpoel. I'm director of Nehem International, a consultancy in the labor market and SME development international. Actually, one of our projects in Egypt, we assisted over 4,000 redundant textile workers to start up their own small company, together with the government and with the trade unions, by the way. But most of these companies ended up in the gray or informal or even black sector. And I would like to hear your comment how you look to promoting entrepreneurship while knowing that a big share of them will end up in the gray economy. And do you see it as advantages? Again, we had strong involvement of the government and the trade unions, and they knew the result and they didn't mind. Neither did we, but I'm very curious for your comments.
I'll answer because it's not polite to have an ex-government person talk about that part. Okay? I love those people. And I have this argument with the people at the Egyptian Central Bank and the Ministry of Investment all the time. Were it not for that unregulated market that gives the flexibility to change from a falafel stand to a flower shop in 5 minutes, right? Instead of going through 3 months of permitting, the Egyptian economy would have been bankrupt. Okay, and there's if any of you know, Nassim Taleb, who wrote the book The Black Swan, has a fantastic book called Anti-Fragile, which says that a distributed economy based on many, many small businesses is much more resilient and less prone to shocks than economies built on big firms. Half of Egypt lost 20, 30, 40% of their revenue, but stayed in business. Imagine large banks or large institutions here surviving that shock in a matter of months. So the resiliency that those people provide is fantastic. Now, it's incumbent on the government to give them incentives, not cash incentives, but make it easy for them to come into the proper market and to come into the formal economy and to pay taxes. But there's no benefit for them to do that. There's only punishment, right? And once you register, all you get is headaches. You get idiots in the government know now where to go knock on your door to ask for a bribe, right? The guy in the local regulator from here and local regulator from that. That's why nobody crosses over. And the government has to reform the regulations from the bottom. And I would tell you, Egypt's maybe the worst country in the Middle East with regulations. Our regulations are like our archaeology. We have like Ottoman regulations and Nasserist regulations and Mubarak. It's layers upon layers of junk. So it needs to be all thrown out. By the way, I say this to the ministers in Egypt all the time, and none of them, not one of them, has had the, let's say, the guts to get up and really do some serious reform about this stuff. We haven't had a government, right? But they need to, this has to be fixed. There can't be 27 steps to set up a woodworking shop in Egypt, but there are 27 steps required from the government. So just, it's, but I'd love to hear more about that program, because it's fantastic.
Yeah? So just one last quick comment on.
I know that one quick comment. Yani today the challenge in the Arab world is having jobs for these unemployed people or the ones who will be coming in the market in 10 years from now. Whether that will be in the formal, in the informal, whatever form it will be, it's just giving them a hope for the future, no matter where the sector is. And I do genuinely believe that the biggest challenge is trying to create these jobs, because really there is a huge challenge which nobody can imagine what the results will be 10 or 15 years from now if things stays the way it is today.
Thank you very much, dear panel members, and thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. We'll break now for 25 minutes, and please, if we can be back here at 3:15 for the next panel. Thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. If I may, please feel free to move forward. Please feel free to move forward. There are seats here in the front. Please feel free to move forward. Please feel free to move forward. Over there, there are empty seats. Please feel free to move forward. I think there's still some people coming back. So, good. So thank you very much, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. The next hour and 10 minutes will be spent with panel number 2. And essentially, we will go through the same process that we did with the first panel. The same form, one question, discussion with the audience, and then at the end, we'll ask Rabia and Ahmed, who started this process, to come back and to recap based on the discussion from the audience, based on the question of the audience, and to see how we can involve your comments, involve your discussion in what we've been discussing so far. So if I may introduce Manfred Schepers, advisor to the president of the EBRD and previous CFO of the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and Habibi, the co-founder and CEO of All World Networks, Ned Jarudi, an innovation executive who has worked in both the private and the public sector as a mentor and an expert in the area of innovation, both in the Arab world as well as the US for larger companies as well as the public sector. Omar Kamal, a finance expert, also when it comes to Islamic finance, who has spent a large part of his career working on one hand for large corporations, on the other hand for family offices in the Arab world. Ewout de Wit, who works for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in the Middle East department, is director for the North Africa, Yemen, and other parts of the Middle East, and who spent, we were just talking, more than half his career either in or related to the Middle East. And Frank Zwetsloot, who is the CEO and founder of ScienceWorks, which links universities and science initiatives together with the private sector. So, I'm sorry, I'm standing in the way, I understood. So, welcome back, and if I may, maybe first, if I can start with Anne. And you've done a substantial amount of research, okay, at Harvard and in other areas on entrepreneurship in the Arab world, and on the effects of certain types of education, on the effects of organizations, also globally, and how this matches the Arab world. Can I just ask you to give a short overview first of your research and what that has resulted so far?
Yes. Well, first, thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I want to express my deep gratitude to the Rabbani Foundation for their leadership for decades as a Palestinian entity, and that's a very, very big deal. My family also comes from Haifa and left the same year Salim's father left. You came here, we came to the United States. You and I are the same age. It's an amazing parallel. I hope our family, who's starting a foundation as well, can learn a great deal from the immense leadership and success of the Rabbani Foundation. So first of all, thank you for the privilege just to be here with you. So on entrepreneurship, I just want to touch on one or two things from the last session and then directly answer your question. As an economist, I think I summarize sort of the big problem we all face, this sort of sense of unease, and we can't always put our finger on it, but I think the sort of basic fact is the global challenge is that the world is becoming more unemployed. Whether you're in a rich country or you're in a poor country, an at-war country or not, basically the overall numbers are the world is becoming more unemployed. So this begins to show up and manifest itself in so many different ways, whether it's resistance in America or Europe to immigrants, refugees, so on and so forth. It plays out in so many dimensions. So the question of entrepreneurship, while very much and importantly focused on Europe, I think is a fundamental, essential global issue. If we don't birth new industries quickly that scale, this sense of unease is going to accelerate. And so entrepreneurship has to be viewed in a very, very hard-nosed manner. So I want to sort of put that context as we now zoom into Europe and the Middle East, and I answer your question specifically. So I want to tell you how I ended up researching a fair amount of entrepreneurship on the Middle East. I was at the Harvard Business School with a very famous professor, Michael Porter. He's sort of the special forces of competition. And I got to work with him for years and write cases and so forth. And as part of that, we really looked at entrepreneurship in poor areas of America. Founded a nonprofit, and we worked with a magazine called Inc. magazine. It's very, very famous in America. They have something called the Inc. 500. If you're any company that's going to be the big boy of the future, you get on the Inc. 500. So years ago, there was baby Microsoft, baby Intel, baby everybody. It's like you see the future. And we learned a huge amount about transformation, and a lot of the magic of America plays out in the Inc. 500. These are the new industries that are being birthed. So it turns out a couple of things. When we talk about entrepreneurship, we, I think, should be very precise. There are a lot of people we call entrepreneurs, but I honestly don't call them entrepreneurs. About 7% of companies that are founded do the lion's share of creating industries and jobs. 7%. It's not everybody, it's not everything. In fact, most entrepreneurs go out of business within 5 years. It's a huge amount of churn. So the question is, who are these big, big players? So off we went across the Middle East and North Africa, and we created something called the Arabia 500, just like the Inc. 500, who are these very fast-growing, successful companies who are growing at 20, 30, 40% a year, birthing new industries. And we found something pretty amazing. And Rabia basically told you my punchline, which was, I asked the question, we had 1,000 of them, where did these guys come from? who birthed them, such that they were birthing, Bait.com and all these others. And it turns out he told you the basics. They're very well educated. They don't become entrepreneurs. They go on to major global multinational corporations, which is very, very important. They get trained by the best in the world in how to attack a market. If you go to Pepsi, that's all you learn, how to attack a market. Or if you're in an airline business, you know how to market to a market, whatever it is. And then some years later, they spin off and they do very well. I think we have to look at entrepreneurship with a hard-nosed manner and look for those kinds who can really birth parallel industries, new industries. The problem in the Middle East is not that they aren't unbelievable when you find them. It's just that their pipeline is so small. And so what I think the fundamental issue we need to grapple with as a world, and in the case of the Middle East, specifically the Middle East, is oxygenating that pipeline. There have got to be many more of these people who go through this intense training mechanism, which is what the multinational ultimately provides, so that they can create not 2 jobs. Honestly, they have to create 2,000 at a time. If they do that, amazing things happen. And this is what I want to say, it's not just the job. Usually they found a huge vacuum. They're solving a big problem. Rabia solved a huge problem. No one knew who wanted jobs and how to find jobs. I mean, he didn't just create hundreds of jobs. He solved a fundamental problem. And then his employees are trained similarly. They have spun off so many other companies. And then he set a financial benchmark of, you want to invest in this kind of company, in this kind of market? There's a benchmark. This type of entrepreneurship we need in the thousands all over the world, and we today desperately need this kind of entrepreneurship in the Middle East. That was the kind of basic summary. It's that kind that disproportionately has impact, yet we're very, very limited in how many we have going through this pipeline.
Thank you, Anne. Just as a follow-up question, you said the world overall is becoming more unemployed. But how does the Middle East match relative to the rest of the world?
Right, so it's just pulling everybody down, right? We are a net negative contributor to this problem. So, some countries, it's just you don't really see it. It's slight. The Middle East has a massive disproportionate effect on becoming more unemployed. But you shouldn't think that it's just Africa or the Middle East. It is Europe. We know it. You feel it in all the issues in the newspapers, in Spain, and issues in Greece, in America. The world is becoming more unemployed. Not necessarily forever, but that's its current trend.
So it's a trend that is changing, or is it a... But is the Middle East bringing the world unemployment down, or is it... I mean, what I mean is it's something which is developing throughout the world?
Throughout the world.
Thank you, Anne. Ewout de Wit, Policy Coordinator, Gulf States, Iran, and Yemen at the Netherlands Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Thanks again for being here, Ewout, and it's good to see you back in Holland. Ewout, can you give us, just share with us, how does the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, on one hand, view what are the priorities towards the region, and what role can the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we heard from the Ministry of Economic Affairs, which of course work together, but what role can the Ministry of Foreign Affairs play in the discussion that we've had during the past days when it comes to promoting entrepreneurship and promoting exchange in this area?
Thanks, Salim. In the North Africa Middle East Department in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are confronted every day with the crisis in the regions, and we are responding to that. But for a big part, we are responding to symptoms still. Priorities for us, of course, finding a political solution for the various conflicts in Syria, in Yemen, in Libya, fighting terrorism. But we also realize we have to fight the root causes of what causes these conflicts, what causes the instability in the region. And we are looking for our own role in that. So we focus very much on supporting political processes, supporting the UN in the various conflicts, bringing people together in what we call track 2 diplomacy, people from various opposing groups talking together. But we're also focusing really on trying to do something on the ground. My colleague from the Ministry of Economic Affairs already mentioned the Dutch Good Growth Fund, which can help with financing of companies. We have developed the LEAD program, which is local employment in Africa for development, which includes North Africa. Again, supporting initiatives to improve local employment. We have what used to be called the Matra South facility, supporting transformation of economies in the Arab region, which we are now going to change into the Netherlands Arab Partnership, which will focus very much on projects that can help improve the business climate, create the right environment for entrepreneurs. Because we, like you, have realized that with all these young people coming on in the labor market, we have to find jobs for these people, and companies play an essential role in creating these jobs. I was in Kuwait before I came back to the ministry this summer, and there people look very much at the government to provide employment, which they can do because there is a lot of money still. But in other countries, that's not the case. And so I think it's good to be together, and I think we can support initiatives like yours in bringing various partners together to see what can private sector do, and then is there a role for us, for the government, to also bring, maybe at country level through our embassies, bring Dutch entrepreneurs together with local entrepreneurs. That is just something practical that I think the ministry can play a role in.
Thank you. And Ewout, as of January, the Netherlands will be the chair of the EU. How does that, I know before that used to be a completely different role than it is today. What impact does that have? How does that, what can the Netherlands specifically do as chair of the EU? Does it change anything? Does it?
Yeah. It's a bit more difficult because as the presidency, we cannot always push our own initiatives very strongly because we are also expected to bring everybody together. So I think that there is a role for us, especially looking towards the region of the Middle East and North Africa. We have a strong historic presence there as the Netherlands. We have an extensive network of embassies, so we have a good knowledge of the region. And of course, we want the European Union to play a bigger role in working towards political solutions in some of these instances, and I'm sure that we will do our best to ensure that happens.
Thank you, Ewout. So, two sectors remaining today. One's innovation and the other one's finance. So let's first start with the innovation, because after you innovate, you should go look for the money. So if I may, Frank Zwetsloot. Frank, you link universities and know-how in universities with the private sector. What is the role of universities in the Netherlands in promoting innovation and promoting the link with the private sector and entrepreneurship, not only in the Netherlands, but internationally? And what role does ScienceWorks play in that?
Yeah, well, one of the main instruments to bring scientific knowledge to new products and services is entrepreneurship. So what you see is that professors now more and more set up, or researchers set up companies creating incubators with many officers of new entrepreneurs, science parks in which all these companies are established, and foreign companies are often attracted to this research core in which these entrepreneurs are evolving. So now in the past 25 years, you may say that whole ecosystems have been created of universities, incubators, accelerators, science parks, and more also investment funds play a very important role in getting all the business done, and also to internationalize that business. Because in essence, you may say that research and science and research and technology development, for a main part as well, is in essence an international play. So, and then if the investors play a major role, they want the entrepreneurs to internationalize as soon as possible because they need to scale up. That's the new word. First, everybody was talking about startups. Now people talk about scale-ups. And that is making your startup bigger and turn it into a company of 100 people or so. And to realize that, you have to internationalize. You have to go to the places where you can find complementary advantages. Advantages in technology, for example, in research. So you go to places where research is that you don't exist, but also where you can just hire technical people in which you can easily set up industries based on your firm and let the business grow. So we set up once a cooperation program with Shanghai, which still exists and which became very big, and hundreds of professors and developers and businesses went to Shanghai, delegations go there, and delegations coming back to the Netherlands, seeing what business they set up in our places. And I think structures like that can be well, relatively easily organized and generated with the Arab world, especially in places where there is a sense for science and technology entrepreneurship, like in the United Arab Emirates. I mean, you can clearly see that a lot of things are happening there. They're very, very welcoming to international people, and but also in other places. I know the Emirates a bit. I know in Saudi Arabia they're also receiving foreign entrepreneurs. Well, of course, we have the great examples of Ahmed, is the incubators that he founded in Cairo and in other places in the Arab world. So these incubators, especially these incubators, can be the core element in which international cooperation between entrepreneurs can be organized, specifically, I would say, with the support of international investment funds that also tend to want to internationalize their investments, and Europeans looking for investments in other places outside Europe and the other way around. So I think there are a lot of opportunities there. And if I may, just another thought about these incubators, which is a very special, another perspective, and that is to do with the refugee crisis, because I feel that every university region has its own competence with the specific technologies and so on. And that would surprise me if in these technologies in which these regions are specialized, there wouldn't be refugees capable in setting up firms in that specific technologies. So I would say, I think you should just organize a competition or so and challenge this at the refugee centers and trying to, let the winners be welcomed in a university incubator or so. I think it's quite a feasible idea. But that's of course, a very other thing. But
but very relevant to the discussion that we're having. So when you're speaking, one of the main issues that you've been speaking about the past days, and actually the first time we met also, was co-incubation. Okay, could you please describe what you mean by co-incubation?
Yeah, well, co-incubation is, let's say, a program that is organized between incubators in one university region and a university region in another country. And then you need an office. Often it can be delivered by a regional development organization, for example, in which you check in which technologies cooperation is needed. So for the researchers, for the professors, for the entrepreneurs, and also maybe for let's say, scale-ups and setting up new establishments. So then you can focus on specific technologies, and the office can organize the exchange between these incubators. And I think nowadays these investors can play a main role in organizing such interactions.
Fantastic, thank you. Ned, if you look at your experience both in the Arab world as well as in the US and internationally when it comes to innovation, and if you look specifically at the past years, what you've been doing in the Arab region, what opportunities do you see for European and Dutch, but also European organizations in the innovation sector, in particular in the Arab world, of course in the UAE where you're based, but also outside the UAE, in the Arab world in general?
Sure. First of all, I'd like to, again, like Anne, thank you for giving us this opportunity. I also have indirect ties into the Rabbani Foundation. One of my cousins actually was a recipient of a scholarship back in the day. So I think, again, thank you for giving the Arab talent hope. I think that's important. The other thing I want to start with is
Yeah, I remember when I first moved to the Middle East from the U.S. back in the late '90s, right? And I had worked for a couple of startups which were successful and were sold to companies like IBM and individuals like Paul Allen, thinking that I would find that same kind of entrepreneurial tech spirit in the region. And I think one of the first people I met was Rabia, and I still remember his first business plan. And he came to me, I was with Intel, and Intel Capital was obviously the venture capital arm of Intel. And we turned him down, unfortunately. We ended up investing in another company which wasn't as successful as Bates. So you win some, you lose some. But I think for the better part of maybe 10 years since Rabia started Bates, the tech entrepreneurship momentum probably wasn't really there. I mean, I think there were some pockets of entrepreneurship in places like Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon, and certainly in the UAE, maybe there were like three successful, tech startups. And then all of a sudden, I think, from 2010 onwards, there's been that real momentum, right, with the proliferation of accelerators, incubators, VC funds being institutionalized. I think the ecosystem has really been building itself very nicely. And even in the last couple of years, 2014, 2015, there have been some national science, technology, and innovation strategies announced in several Arab countries, okay? In places like Jordan, and I think Dr. Fawaz, you paved the way for the Jordan, innovation agenda way back when. Places like the Gulf, Egypt, some places in North America, North Africa as well. And I think, looking at those national innovation strategies, I think there are some great opportunities for Dutch and European organizations, be it private sector organizations, universities, and even government, to really engage around those STI and entrepreneurship agendas. And when I say around those, I mean, if you look at, for example, in the UAE, which is where I'm based and quite familiar with the national innovation strategy there, there are probably three layers that you can engage with. The first layer is the kind of enabling environment, so helping to put in place the right regulatory framework. I think this has been kind of discussed ad infinitum the last couple of days, including helping to put in place some real kind of intellectual property mechanisms to help the startups from the region, and I think you have a wealth of experience in that matter, so you can actually bring that experience in. The ease of doing business, I think it was mentioned earlier, legal frameworks. I think Holland is very well known for its legal environment. The technology infrastructure, I think that's being built in a lot of the different countries, using European companies and their know-how to help build that. I think education has been talked about a lot, and I remember there was one question in the earlier panels. What can I think the IKEA gentleman asked the question. Yes, how can multinationals help? I remember back in the early 2000s, we worked very closely with Dr. Fawaz and his team and the Ministry of Education in Jordan to pilot the Intel Teach program, which is a teacher training program to develop the ICT skills of teachers in the classroom, which will then kind of be given back to the students. Something that recently happened in the UAE also at K-12 level was the Smart Learning Initiative. And I think Amin over here is actually involved in this initiative. And there are also multinationals involved in this initiative, right? And so there is an opportunity also for yourselves as European organizations to partake in that. Another thing that was announced was a partnership on higher education with Stanford University to embed entrepreneurship and innovation into higher education. So again, an opportunity for Dutch universities and European universities to contribute to these national innovation agendas. And also, there is also this focus on not just developing entrepreneurs within the overall innovation umbrella, but also developing intrapreneurs, right? So within the organizations, within government, for example, in the UAE, recently a Chief Innovation Officer program was launched, and they've been taken through an innovation diploma program, 12 months with Cambridge University. So again, and the idea is to reduce the number of people that by default go into government. And this has been publicly stated by the leadership of the country, is we don't want people to just think that, okay, government is the main career path, especially for Gulf citizens themselves. So the idea is, how do you create that culture of intrapreneurship, for example, within government, but also within private sector, family businesses, which I think my friend Omar will touch upon, and then maybe spin them off as startups, right? Sort of what the UK did with their mutuals program. So that's another avenue to pursue. And then finally, the sectorial focus. I think you look at those and you analyze those national innovation strategies, and in each country they've focused on 5 to 7 key sectors that are of importance to the sustained innovation path and diversification path for that country. So I think having your companies, your organizations that are experts in those industry sectors, I think will go a long way also to solidify kind of the partnership opportunities with the Arab world. And maybe, a quick win, and we discussed this over the last couple of days, is maybe having trade missions, right, that are made up of, government, private sector, startups, universities, and go around to the key markets that have publicly announce their national innovation strategies and see whether there are opportunities to collaborate. And finally, the funding, I'll leave that to my friend Omar.
Thank you very much. And you've also been working on city innovation, on innovation on the level of cities.
Yes.
Has entrepreneurship been part of that process? And if so, how can Dutch entrepreneurs maybe tie up with local entrepreneurs? Maybe you can just touch on what you were doing when it comes to city innovation.
Yeah, so I think there's been a lot of different smart city initiatives across the region, and the idea, for example, now Dubai was the first city to announce an open data initiative in the Gulf. I'm not sure if in Jordan that's been announced yet, but in the Gulf certainly, and that creates a huge opportunity for startups to tap into the data that's out there from the Open Data Initiative and come and either partner with, European startups can come and partner with startups that are existing in the region to kind of create new companies that can take advantage of this Open Data Initiative, or come and actually set up in the region themselves, right? So I think there are definitely opportunities for startups to collaborate with other startups in the region. And I think if I look at Flat 6 Labs in Abu Dhabi, I'm one of the mentors at Flat 6 Labs, which is under Ahmad's remit. I think, what did you say, 50 countries are being represented right now at applied to Flat 6 Labs. So I think that The startups that can really come from anywhere, and Europe, historically has had very close ties to the Middle East. So of course, that'd be a perfect candidate.
Thank you. Manfred, can you maybe touch on what the activities are of the EBRD in the region, how you're supporting entrepreneurship in the region, but also how can Dutch organizations, so separate from Arab organizations, how could Dutch organizations also benefit from your activities there?
Thank you, Salim. And first of all, thank you for organizing this, because I think, particularly in times like now, I think bringing entrepreneurs and business people from the Arab world here to identify ways of doing business together, I think is critical. The EBRD, for those of you who are not familiar, is a bank effectively that has been set up in moments of change and to some extent dysfunctional market systems to help. And so, of course, the bank was created in the early 90s to help all the old communist countries from Poland to Mongolia. And working with these countries at the government level and at the private level to support both reform, enabling environments, and to provide finance across the capital structure of the various industries. And in around 2011, 2012, when the political and economic transformation commenced in many of the North African countries, the shareholders of the bank was created in the early 90s effectively by the G7 countries to support Eastern Europe, and all the EU member states and all the countries in Central and Eastern Europe and several North African countries are shareholders, asked the bank to use the same skills of what it had learned across Central and Eastern Europe, to use the same skills in supporting the countries in what we call SEMET, Southern and Eastern Mediterranean. And so now we have a local presence in Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt and Jordan. We will also start in the first quarter with a trust fund for Palestine, and Lebanon will also become a shareholder, and we will start investing in Lebanon as well. And the key areas where we work on, and of course it's entrepreneurism and a public entity is to some extent an oxymoron, but it's quite clear that, and I think this came out of the discussions that I partially joined, that without the enabling environment, entrepreneurship is really, really difficult. And the enabling environment in many countries in the Arab world, of course, is extremely difficult, in particular the ones who don't have the benefit of natural resources. And so we work effectively in four key areas. One is working with the government in terms of the enabling environment and seeking reform where possible. And although it's very difficult, and of course the democratic processes are difficult, the way to have change achieved by governments is difficult, but there are countries where there is remarkable things happening. Jordan is one of them. We're seeing it in Morocco, we're seeing it in Tunisia, and we're also seeing it in Egypt, although Egypt, of course, the political environment is more difficult, but reforms are being made, a reduction of areas of rent, reduction in areas of subsidy, which are really the killers to entrepreneurism. Secondly is to provide finance. Many of these countries, of course, have highly underdeveloped financial systems, whether or not it's long-term credit, whether or not it is local currency credit, whether or not it is growth equity, whether or not it's capital markets. Many of these markets, these things remain underdeveloped. Thirdly is capacity building, and this is, I think, we need a lot of help in terms of the entrepreneurial community engaging with us, but it's an area where in Central and Eastern Europe it's been the biggest success. I think we have not been able to change all the systems and long-term paths of some of the countries in Central and Eastern Europe, but what has really helped has provide the capacity building for medium enterprise, for small enterprise when it comes to financial reporting, whether or not it comes to systems integration. These are issues that for many SMEs are way too expensive. And these are for donors who want to contribute to that are actually very small donations. And so this is in the region we see an enormous opportunity to help to allow the SME companies to take on consultants that otherwise would be out of their reach and to work on the areas of business planning, financial reporting, and systems integrations. And lastly is networks. The EBRD is an institution. The G7 countries are shareholders. All the European Union member states are shareholders. The countries in which we invest are shareholders. And so we do have networks of FDI. We have networks of government. And so we need to find ways of bringing them more to bear on the entrepreneurial environments, because I think many of the investors from Europe into the region fear the region. They don't know who to go to. They don't know which government official they can trust. They don't quite often know which business people they can trust. And I think working with the EBRD in Central and Eastern Europe, of course, has been a very successful strategy, and we see a similar trend. But these are things that are new. We've only been doing it for 3 years, and of course the networks in the region are changing because of the economic and political transformation that's taking place. In terms of the sectors we work with, we can talk about the entrepreneurial impact in the region. We can talk about the employment impact that the entrepreneurial sector will bring to the region. But obviously it will need a significant ramp up in infrastructure. It will need a significant ramp up in the cost of energy. So areas like transportation, urban transport, urban municipalities, urban utilities, water, wastewater. If these things do not get addressed, there will never be a successful entrepreneurial sector. And these cannot be done out of public budgets. All the public budgets in all the economies other than the oil-producing economies are at limit. They have no more debt capacity. And so we need to find also this an area where entrepreneurs are willing to engage. It's far more difficult, very capital intensive. But without those sectors on infrastructure, renewable energy, the entrepreneurial sector will not be able to thrive. The corporate sector, similar to, I disagree with this employment point you made that the world is going into a low employment environment. I think the region has enormous potential. Some countries, labor costs are low. In many of the countries, tourism opportunities are phenomenal. Agribusiness opportunities are phenomenal. And over the past decades, they have not been developed. We've not had FDI to the extent. And so we see that in countries like Morocco and even in Egypt and Jordan, there are opportunities. We see in companies, foreign companies. We've just financed a car parts manufacturer who's going to do parts manufacturing for French car manufacturers in Morocco. We've seen a white goods company who's made a big investment in Egypt. There are these opportunities where foreign investors are able to come. And so there is, but it's something where it's going to take a lot of confidence building for foreign capital come in, which, and of course, in the headlines that we're seeing out of Syria and areas of conflict are overshadowing a bit the opportunities that clearly are there in countries like Jordan and Egypt and Morocco. In terms of the infrastructure, the entrepreneurial sector, the area of finance, which I think some people touched upon, which is important. The foreign banking system has closed down, so there are no more foreign banks in the North Africa region. Of course, they are in the Gulf, but for different reasons. And so there needs to be this replacement finance, which is supporting local banks, supporting local currencies, supporting growth equity. These are ingredients that are very, very short supply. So this is where the bank is focused on to try and facilitate all three. The area of reform and the business environment, the area of corporate governance. Equity is a phenomenally important aspect in the whole entrepreneurial growth. We have ourselves in Central and Eastern Europe, we're a minority investor of 250 companies. We have a network of 500 nominee directors. And so this is the network we want to also introduce into the North Africa region, where we've got ex-people, board members from European companies. So it's not so much an entrepreneurial network, it's people who have got phenomenal experience having been managers of companies who are very, very happy to devote their time being a nominee director at companies in Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia. In winter it's warm there. So that's a big base of people that is dormant, not being used. There are language issues, so companies need to start having board meetings in English, they need to report in English, but these are the breakthroughs we need to have. The same applies to Southern Europe. This is not a North Africa problem, it's also a Southern European problem, but the problem is the same, and these people are available. So I think this is a big link, and it applies very much to Holland. I think people who've been in business in Holland, who've been entrepreneurs, who've been board members, I think we're very keen to devote their time to be serving on boards of companies in the region. And the area of technical assistance, I think, which many people have touched upon. In terms of one of the conclusions, Salim, we discussed it this morning. I think discussions like this, I think, are very, very useful also for the EBRD, and we need to find more ways of incorporating them in our work, because I see a lot of the conclusions being embedded in the strategies that we will express towards the governments, and so that conclusions from this, that we can talk to the governments in the region and reflect back not only what a public entity like ourselves says, but reflect back what the private sector is saying via our words. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Manfred. It's great that we've reached one important stakeholder in addition to others, at least during these past 2 days. So thank you very much for that, Manfred, for your participation also. What's interesting is that what you said and what we've all been discussing, and one of the conclusions this morning is that really, if you look at what the Arab entrepreneurs are asking for internationally, in very broad lines, is network know-how and funding. It's the exact same thing in my business that Dutch entrepreneurs are looking for in the Arab world. So in a different way, but it really, and a lot of what you said also now, it comes down to networks, it comes down to know-how, it comes down to know-who, and funding. And then funding, Omar, you've been active for many years when it comes to funding, and one of the key challenges in the Arab world that we've seen during the past days is funding of initiatives, is funding of entrepreneurs. And where do you see opportunities in that field? Where do you see openings in that field?
So thank you, Salim, and also Maureen is not here. Thank you for the foundation. Thank you for getting us together and selecting the right topic at the right time. I think that the time is excellent. I was wondering if funding is one of the key challenges, why did you put it towards the end? But
you saved the best for last, right?
I will build on, and you comment that the word today is more unemployed. I think that was for last year, because today the US market unemployment rate reached 5%. And Europe is getting relatively better. But let's say we are talking about last year figures. I'm in nature, they say I'm an optimist, I'm optimistic usually. But let's assume the following scenario. Number one, you have the youth coming to the market in the coming 10 years, which is significant in our part of the world, in emerging markets. Number two, there's one school of thought saying the next crisis will be the emerging market crisis. Number three, the technology disruption, which is huge. The impact of artificial intelligence, of unemployment. What is that? Going to impact the unemployment rate. And then the situation we have in the Middle East. So put all of this together, I think the unemployment will increase. And the timing of talking about this topic cannot be better. It's perfect, and entrepreneurship is extremely important topic to be discussed, and how can we enhance and create the platform to have entrepreneurship in our part of the world. Now, funding, for me, I think people say it's a key challenge in the Middle East. That means immediately, there's lack of funding in the Middle East for entrepreneurs. But you know what? It's full of liquidity. Actually, in the Middle East, in the Arab Gulf, it's full of wealth. So how come? So there's a disconnect. And the disconnect, not that there's no money in the Middle East to fund, or there's no enough projects presented by the entrepreneurs. I think the problem is in the link, where actually the funders in the Middle East lack education when it comes to entrepreneurship. I think that's the issue. And it's the issue with the different stakeholders, starting from banks, go down to family offices, when it comes to philanthropy. So the different stakeholders, I think, need to be definitely educated about the importance and how to fund entrepreneurs. And I think that's the challenge, rather than lack of funding in the Middle East. Now, if I want to summarize what are the sources of funding for such important projects. Obviously, one will be banks. Now, what's interesting that when you talked about, there are no more foreign banks in North Africa, there are some in the Middle East, and the funding is being done through the local banks. Here comes the importance of something called Islamic banking, which is about 33% of the assets in the Middle East are actually of Islamic banks. Now, the perception we have on Islamic banks, it's all about riba-free and interest-free. And actually, one of the key concepts of Islamic banks is risk-sharing or no pain, no gain. So if me as a bank take a risk, then the return is what justified. Unfortunately, for several reasons, Islamic banks didn't leverage on this part, and most of their financing was asset-based financing. Hence, the risk was on the low side. Although the theory of Islamic banking, Islamic finance, supports very much venture capital and private equity. But we're not seeing that. Now, you might say that the regulations in our part of the world, by the central banks, doesn't encourage banks to fund the deposits of the clients into risky projects. But there's a solution for that also. Then we need a change in the regulatory framework of the central banks. But there's a big, by the way, because usually Islamic banks are more liquid, and the source of funding they have on the liability side, on the deposit, is almost zero because they have zero-based deposits. So there's liquidity we can leverage on there. So that's on the Islamic banking side. The other one is the family offices. Now, being fortunate to work and exposed to the world of also Islamic banking, but of family offices, it's very simple. If we link today what's happening in our part of the world, we are now entering the third generation of wealth. So you had the first, second, and now the third. The theory we talked about is the first create the wealth, second maintain it, and the third, unfortunately, loses it. Okay? I personally not necessarily believe in that. And the question is, how can we leverage on the idea of entrepreneurship and actually convert this third level of losing it to creating it? And here there's, by the way, a serious opportunity. And I think it's a very good topic for research. I think there's a huge potential there. Now, the good news is the following. The third generation in the Middle East is mainly educated. And educated where? In the West. The third generation of the Middle East, actually, when it comes to social media, they love it. They're all over the place. Facebook and so on. And they know it very well. And they're coming and they say that, you know what? My grandfather created the wealth. My father maintained it, but you know what? I want to come up from a different angle. Please don't tell me we need to diversify the asset and grow slowly and surely and for generations. That's fine. But I want to have a part of the allocation of the family invested in the world of venture capital, private equity, technology, and so on. Hence, there's a huge opportunity. And why there's an interesting opportunity there? Because the family office, especially the big ones, they have a full infrastructure. So they have the accountants, they have the lawyers, they have the IT system. It's all there. But you just need to leverage and support this newcomer who came from the West, full of ideas, because you talked about the multinational companies and how they can leverage. I'm saying it's almost there because they came from abroad. They can leverage on an existing sophisticated, complex structure of the family office to actually build on their ideas. And if I'm telling you, let's say you support them, on a big family office, what they're going to lose of their allocation? It's less than 0.1%. It's nothing. It's nothing. But you know what? It's worth it. Now, in the Middle East, this is something quite interesting. We need to find a hero, so for people to follow. So hopefully one day we can have a leader that actually ventured and he was supported by the family office, and we leverage on the social media to say, by the way, here is a case study. And others will say, you know what, Dad, I want to be like him. Let's go for it, and please support me. And as you know, family offices, especially in the Arab Gulf, they're powerful. And I think there's an element of. The last one is philanthropy. By the way, for us, philanthropy is charity at the end of the story. Actually, not necessarily. There's a lot of philanthropy now in the Middle East. And I was recently in an event where you can come up with creative structures. Through philanthropy, you can fund entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs' ideas. Where as giving the money, you know what, I'm not giving it for charity. I'm not even expecting a return, but I want to give it, probably when they return it back to me. But you know what, I want to see an impact. Financial impact, thank you very much, I get it somewhere else. But I want to see the social impact we're talking about. Hence, the issues we are facing in our part of the world, where social issues are significant. We, at this day, today in the Middle East, and we're losing, countries are no more there. People are losing hope. So how can we link the funding to actually changing the fear and worry to hope and happiness? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Almar. And I think you answered your own question, why Lutfia is last. Yeah. Thank you. You answered your own question, why I asked you to speak last. Thank you very, very much. Yeah. So, excellent, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind, we'll be going 10 minutes over time. We started a little late after the break. We'll be going 10 minutes over time. We'll limit it to 10 minutes. So my first ask for questions, please. Who has questions for the panel, the second panel? Please, Herman. Sorry, the mic's coming.
Thank you very much. My name is Herman Kleinsma. I'm the chairman of the Dutch-Libyan Cooperation Council. And we strive to strengthen Dutch-Libyan relations. I have a question for the EBRD, if you allow me. You are avoiding the big L word. I didn't hear Libya in your speech. So would EBRD be prepared to seriously consider mobilizing your capacity and your efforts and your knowledge and your expertise to help the Libyan people? And I do realize that at the moment it's very difficult because to whom are you talking? However, I think there's a very strong need, especially from the Libyan business community, to get help from anywhere they can get it. And I would like to I got your answer on that. And the other thing is, Mr. Yannick de Pont, earlier, you mentioned that there is a tendency to avoid doing business or being in touch with governments. And you said you should, that's something I didn't quite understand. Because what we try to do in Libya at the moment, try to stay away from the government because we don't know with whom to do business. So we're trying to take an initiative for example, the municipal communities and for the SMEs in Libya to take our own initiative and not to interfere and to look at the government or to UN or EU or whoever's doing something, trying to achieve something in Libya. Could you clarify that point?
Thank you.
You said something? Yeah. Okay.
Thank you very much. Please.
Well, I'll be quick. I think you partially answered the question. We did have a request from the Libyan authorities in the year after the fall of the Gaddafi regime, and we had a delegation that visited Tripoli to negotiate. But after the civil war, there is no capacity for us to deal with the Libyan government that has authority over the country, which makes it impossible for the EBRD as an international institution to be able to work in the country if there's no government with whom we can go through the formalities, because there are certain core principles in terms of only being able to work in the country that is a shareholder of the bank. Libya is not yet a shareholder, and that we need certain agreements with the government to be able to operate there. So it's a desperate situation. The drafts are there. We're ready. We have a team that has visited there several occasions, but there needs to be a government with whom we can engage. I mean, take the example of Palestine, with whom we are now, and that's obviously more complex in terms of its statehood. But there, we're working with the Palestinian Authority, and we're able to implement a trust fund, which is not a full membership, but it's at least we're engaging with the Palestinian Authority in terms of the priorities and how we will operate there.
Thank you. Yannick,
may I add, and Iran?
I mean, I think this is something which, for example, there was no expectation of North Africa, but in 2011-12, our shareholders thought that this was a useful way for the EBRD to engage. At the time, there was a discussion among the shareholders that we should operate in the MENA region. And MENA would have meant that we would have to include Iraq and Yemen, which from an operational standpoint would be too complex. But this is for the shareholders to decide, and if they wish, obviously, if they wish the bank to operate there, in these countries, I'm sure we can add value, but it's currently not on the agenda.
Thank you. Yannick, you want to answer the... Yeah, the mic's next to you.
The mic is there.
Mic, okay.
It's more polite then. I'm not sure if I got your question exact. Maybe just to clarify, what I said is that we had a request from a minister from the east, from Al Baida, which is the internationally recognized part of Libya, to help in rollout entrepreneurship education at the universities and high schools where he is operating. And so what I tried to gain at is say that this is a request I think we should embrace. What I think you are pointing at perhaps is that, of course, in a situation in Libya where you have a protracted problematic situation and not a national unity government, which factors do you work with? Now, we are also working on other parts of these kind of territories, but then we work indeed a level lower. No, no, I think actually you shouldn't stay away from government if possible. But maybe to give another example, we work inside Syria at the moment on higher vocational agricultural schools. And then we work with local level, local council level, local municipal level, and with professors from universities. And we stay away from the higher political level, obviously, because it's such a political mess that we don't want to tarnish or get like branded to be pro this or anti that. So I think, if possible, I would engage with government. But in some of these conflict situations, you need to be very careful how you operate in this.
Thank you. I think there was a question, please. Question there, and was there a question here also? Or your question? Yeah. Sorry. Thank you. Yeah. You're next, please. You're next. Lutfia.
Thank you. My name is Kees Vrijters. I'm here together with my Noor team from the Noor project. And I want to thank you again for the invitation. As I look around, it seems that we are the youngest visitors right here. So I hope to enlighten you with a different perspective. From the Noor project, we have the ambition to bridge the gap between the Arab and Western world by sending students on exchange to the MENA region. And when they get back, they share their experiences in the Netherlands at high schools and at special evenings. And the Noor project is a part of ISEC, which is the largest youth-led organization in the world, which has the goal of promoting youth leadership. Sorry. Also, by sending students away on an exchange where they will develop themselves. Now you see that's a very bottom-up approach. And what I've heard mostly here are top-down approaches to, developing the region. So maybe your ideas are bottom-up, but I hear mostly your solutions are top-down. So what I want to know is, how do you see bottom-up organizations and youth-led organizations, and how do you see them developing in the MENA region, and do you see any possibilities of cooperating with them? Thank you.
Thank you. Could I give the word for that? Yeah? Please.
Well, is this here? Yes, it's
yeah.
here. The entrepreneurs that I was referring to are on what we call the Arabia Fast Growth 500. You may not consider them youthful, but I think all of us would. They are approximately 35 years old. All right, so they're just a few years ahead of you. These are the ones that I talked about who did very much what you did. You go to a very fine university, you've seen the world. Hopefully you've worked very hard for a very important type of organization. And it doesn't always have to be private sector. You could work for the UN, the EBRD, others. And then you are really prepared to take on the hardest. If entrepreneurship were easy, we would not be having this conversation. It's a complete myth that it's a happy, easy thing to do. It is the hardest thing to do. You need to effectively be licensed, like you're licensed to be a surgeon or to be a lawyer. You need to really have kind of trained and prepared. But what I would love to see energy like yours doing is going and working for very successful entrepreneurs in Europe or in the Middle East. What you will learn watching them 24/7 is precious. You would then have the ability to also spin out. If you work for Rabia at Bait, and we just use him as the constant example because he's one of the few in the Middle East that's very well known, what you could learn from him, what you could impart to others would be immeasurable. So I think youth organizations who could spend time, if that were possible, inside these very successful, growing organizations would bring great skills and interest and passion you have. You would take away a huge amount that would be valuable in Europe and in the Middle East. I would ask you to direct your attention to going and actually seeking a job or an internship for more than a week or two for several years.
Thank you, Anna. And I think a great thing about Noor is they've sent about 30 to 40 students per year to the Arab world. And different organizations, commercial, NGO, different organizations. So
that's great.
Bravo. Please, there's a last question, unless is there after this another question or? Thank you. Last question. Oh,
Salim, thank you. Actually, Hamza Ibrahim, I'm an entrepreneur here in the Netherlands. My question is very simple. The question was asked about forgetting Libya, and I think the question was asked about Iran, and how about Algeria?
I don't know Algeria that well, but we have had recent discussions. But Algeria has been, because of its ability to survive in its economy in a relatively insular manner, it has not requested support from the international community in developing its private sector. Now, obviously, oil price is not what it was before, and so the urgency is getting more important. So their discussion, they could qualify, but they would have to make a request, and they're all, one of the. This is part of the EBRD's conditionality. We do work with governments who do respect the principles of multi-party democracy. And so we will need to engage with the government in a way that there also needs to be an opening up of the political process, which has been the case in Morocco, in Jordan, in Egypt, Tunisia. So it's a process, but the opportunity is there and there is dialogue.
Thank you. Last question.
My name is Mohammed Zawawi. I'm studying a Master of Public Health with a scholarship from Lutfia Rabbani Foundation. Actually, my question is that for EBRD, actually, like the social background of your projects, like in Egypt, if you consider, for example, projects like supporting coal industry, which is coming now, well, actually, this, from one side, we lose socially. We get we get new business done, but actually, on the other side, from social aspects and health aspects, we lose so much. So I guess, I don't know if really evaluate the social aspect and other aspects of these projects you go to do in these countries.
I think one of the key reasons for the EBRD to work in these countries is specifically to ensure that labor standards and environmental standards are lifted and that governance standards are lifted. I think we've seen it across many of the countries where the application, the equal rights for women in the labor force, these are key issues in the conditionality in which we invest. There's some questions. So I think on terms of the social practices we demand when we invest in a project, I think those are of standards that we would all greatly respect. The areas where are always of contention is in relation to energy, where, of course, it's unrealistic to say that Egypt can generate its electricity out of renewables, or that Jordan can generate its electricity out of renewables. But they can make a significant progress, and so we're supporting significant solar projects in Morocco, we're supporting a vast solar project in Jordan, but at the end of the day, we also need to improve the efficiency of the regular gas and electricity production. So there are some environmental questions where we're not only doing renewables, we're also supporting gas power generation.
Thank you. If I may now, I'd like to give the word to Ahmed, Alfi, and Nabia just for their thoughts after this afternoon, and I'll be back for some closing. Or is it only Ahmed? Or is it?
We'll let Ahmed go first.
Okay, please. And then I'll be back for some closing comments.
I would actually like first to comment, when you say the bottom up, you're talking age-wise, but your youth is definitely not the bottom, okay? So I heard that inference in what you said, so I just wanted to clarify that. That's not how I look at it. I spend my days with 22 to 35-year-old entrepreneurs all day long. They're definitely not the bottom. And then you'll see, as from our discussion, we're trying to take everything into account. I heard a lot of suggestions and questions, and seems I addressed the regulatory aspect, and there were several questions about regulatory, but I think in our discussions, our consensus was we weren't really going to devote much of our efforts into the regulatory reform. Again, because of the return on effort factor, we didn't think that was the optimal utilization. But I think there was a consensus that our efforts in bridging the knowledge gap between whether it's financial institutions, people like yourselves, organizations, so on, that's something where we could add value. Setting up educational exchanges, whether it's temporary visas for students or workers to come here to be trained, or vice versa, exchange programs like Noor, those type of things, those are all value added. I would tell you, I'm very biased, but I still think that online is the best way to exchange information, and it's the best way to connect people. And there is a generation that probably those three people are the only ones who are really in touch with it, but it's like a blob across the world, and they all think about the same. Okay, and 90% of them think the same, and 90% of them have learned the values of tolerance and entrepreneurship and hard work and socializing and online courtesy and protocols that give them this one ubiquitous culture across the world. And I think we can take advantage and leverage that across the MENA region to really inspire and educate. The thing that we're walking away with as individuals is we're putting together a task list, because we don't want this to be a panel where at the end we give you a document or give everybody a piece of paper and here's a list of recommendations, something to read at home or on a quiet evening. We want this to be an action list. What are you going to do? What am I going to do? And I would challenge as many of you as possible to think about how you can personally engage, whether it's in mentoring startups, whether it's in expanding and giving people access to your network, okay, whether it's in collaborating with any of the members of the group here who, most of them devote their lives to working on these issues. So there's really nothing to add too much to the 3 slides that I showed at the beginning, which is the consensus of the group. And I think I covered most of the things, except there's one thought that kept hitting me when Omar said artificial intelligence. Keep in perspective that actually a lot of people in the Middle East are willing to work for wages that the rest of the world pays robots. okay? People in the Middle East are willing to work for robot wages. It's really sad, and they really need help. So really, really this concept of all over the world, people are making everybody's lives easier by hiring robots. People in Egypt would love that job. People in the Middle East would love that job at the same cost as the robot, even cheaper. So many times, many companies find it's cheaper to hire a person than fix a machine. All right? So let's keep that in mind. We can actually impact that, okay? And that's what I'm hoping that, you know, everybody here will join all of us in trying to impact that outcome. Thank you.
Please.
Since I get the pleasure of the last word, I'd like to once again thank the Lutfia Rabbani Foundation for putting together this wonderful get-together. It's much appreciated. Thank you, Salim. I want to try and end on a bit of a positive note, because what I found from the last day of working together is a whole bunch of people came together from varied backgrounds and varied contexts. So we had people from Europe, people from the Middle East, the private sector, the public sector, the educational sector. And in spite of the variation in contexts, we very quickly came together on a consensus. And that consensus was, A, the Middle Eastern region is far from being in an ideal situation today. We all realize that. However, we also realize that there is hope, and that hope is in empowering young people to create their own destiny and to create stability and jobs through entrepreneurial ventures. And so would it be nice if we had a safer ecosystem? Would it be nice if we had more rule of law? Would it be nice if we had more entrepreneurial encouragement? It would. But what's at the basis of entrepreneurship is the ability to find challenges and to overcome them. And so, if I may, just from my own personal journey of 15 years of entrepreneurship in the Middle East, I've had governments invite me into countries and ask that we employ a lot of people, and then overnight try and kick me out of that country. I've arrived into certain countries to manage my businesses, and in one particular occasion arrived in a compound late at night where both of my managers lived, and that compound was attacked. And in fact, the area where we were sitting was blown up, and a lot of people died. And throughout the 15 years of my existence, we've had offices shut down and people having to be evacuated because of various issues that occurred across the region. That being said, I woke up every day, the day after one of these things would happen, and I got to work and I thought, what are the solutions and how can we continue to move on? And every year of the last 15 years, we've continued to grow, continued to hire more people, and continued to help more people get employed. And so I think there's a real opportunity for us to come together to create hope in the region. And the best way to do that is, again, best, I think, summarized by something Salim said. A lot of it has to do with knowledge. It's, can we help young people with the right frameworks for them to start businesses and to grow them? 2, it's networks. Can we allow them to exchange ideas with people all over the world about how success looks like? And then to a large degree, it is finance, which is, can we support them along the way because there will be bad times, and can we help get them through that? Now, those 3 things are not very difficult to do. And their ability to create change is rather fast. In other words, getting people through a great university is a 4-year experience. And there's the opportunity to do that for thousands of people relatively quickly. Getting them some workplace experience takes a year or 2. Getting them finance doesn't take that long. So I walked out of the last 24 hours really feeling that we can, as a group, help change the destiny of the region by doing some pretty important and relatively easy things that will move the region forward and then hopefully as a result make the whole world a better place and a safer place. And I thank you all for giving us the opportunity to share our ideas, and I thank you again to the foundation for having put together such a wonderful gathering.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, first to the speakers, your commitment and your passion exemplary. Thank you so, so much for being here. Thank you. I'd like to thank the main sponsor for this event, which is the NCH. Thank you, NCH, for being the main sponsor. I'd like to thank our board members who've been with us for many years, who've supported us all these years. Jan Donner, Jan Peters, Esan Tourabals, Maya Meyer, Frank Hube, and of course my wife, Yvette. My brother, Moin, and the team at the, it's just tiredness, don't worry. The team at the foundation, Helene, Annelot, Loes, you've done an amazing, amazing job, and my kids, who've really, without you guys, this would never have happened. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here. Sorry, bro.